Welcome to the WACO Experience, an American story.
We, the people.
With your host, D. Scott Smith.
In order to form a more perfect union.
Interviews with leaders in business, government, and nonprofit organizations.
Promote the general welfare.
Jobs, products and services, and infrastructure for strong communities.
Secure the blessings of liberty.
The WACO Experience is an American story, a story of communities across America. It is your story.
What we're working on, the Jacob de Cordova Society is now working on, is continuing that legacy, bringing it to light, getting the community involved. We want to work with kids. We want to work with really anybody who's interested in learning the history and seeing the vision that Jacob once saw.
Waco, Texas was founded in March of 1849, 175 years ago by Jacob de Cordova. Today I have guests Monica Shannon and Jeff Aresty from the Jacob de Cordova Society. And you can learn more, jacobdecordovasociety.org. I'm your host, D. Scott Smith. You can learn more about this program and sponsors and find links to the podcast version of this program online at thewacoexperience.com. I'm grateful to our sponsors, White Bluffs Construction, custom building, home remodeling. I encourage you, call Seth at 254-227-2002 and schedule White Bluffs Construction to build your patio, deck, or pergola. Visit their website, whitebluffsconstruction.com. My wife and I had questions about healthcare insurance. Monica Shannon of Texas Healthcare for You listened to us, answered our questions, and helped my family to find the right coverage. Call Monica today at 254-339-3421. Visit the website, txhealthcareforyou.com. That's txhealthcare, the number 4 and the letter U.com. Beau's Coffee offers hot and cold beverages, catering, and provides employment for people with disabilities. They offer a conference room you can reserve and use at no cost. Visit Beau's Coffee today at 110 Franklin in Waco. ChordBuddy is the world's best way to learn guitar. 100% U.S. made. This learning system and Shark Tank winner will have you playing real music on a real guitar right away. Learn to play guitar today at ChordBuddy.com. The Cactus Rose Ranch. Young, old, or in between, learning how to work with a horse is confidence building. Cactus Rose Ranch offers individual lessons or monthly memberships. Contact them for riding lessons or ranch parties and their nonprofit program, Healing Heroes with Horses. Online at thecactusroseranch.com. Well, D. Scott here, and we're on location downtown Waco, and we're actually sitting in the office of Texas Healthcare for You. Monica, let's go ahead and have you introduce who we're going to be talking to.
Hi, Scott, and thank you for having us today. I'm so excited. I hope we have a good time. So I'm Monica Shannon, and it's Texas Healthcare for You, but I also am the executive director of the Jacob de Cordova Society. And I have here with me the president and founder, Jeff Aresty.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you for having us.
Jeff, you, like myself, am not a native Wacoan, so let's get a little background on yourself. How did you end up coming to Waco and becoming president of this group? 175-year celebration.
About 4 years ago, we moved to Waco from Houston, where we had moved from Massachusetts to Houston 10 years prior. So we brought up our family in Massachusetts at the end of the run, and we came to Houston. Our daughter ended up going to College Station, to Texas A&M Medical School, and did her residency here in Waco Family Medicine. She now is working with Baylor Scott & White, and she runs a clinic out in Gatesville. So in the process, she invited her parents to become grandparents here in Waco, and so we moved 4 years ago. In the process, I had done projects for 20 years running a nonprofit called the Internet Bar, essentially building young people opportunities that they could take advantage of and work globally and be in a fair system. We did a lot of work in arts and culture, a lot of work in music, and when we came here, I found a lot of people interested in the arts and culture community. It was exciting. I didn't know much about it, but I met an artist who really had been enamored with Jacob de Cordova. And my next door neighbor and I talked about it at coffee one day. We're all pretty new, like in the first year. We said, let's meet this artist. And we found out that he had a lot of beautiful art. And she suggested that we hold an exhibit at her house. I said, sure. And that's where I met Monica and several other people. About, we must have had 80, 90 people show up. All wanted to see this fellow, Roy de Romero's art. He's a fabulous artist. It turns out that Monica had represented him over the course of time. So I met all kinds of people. And then I found out about the story of Jacob de Cordova. He's a Sephardic Jew. That is my dad's background from that family. So I was interested, and I also knew the name de Cordova because there's a de Cordova Museum in Massachusetts, which, as it turns out, is the next generation down in this family. So one thing led to another, and I didn't realize where it would go at the start, but we did have an art exhibit, and then one thing led to another, and here we are.
And so there's a lot of things have flowed together and brought this to the point where you came from the Northeast, came to South Texas, now you're here. All these streams are flowing together. Monica, how did you end up at that art exhibit?
Well, as he mentioned, he was working with Roy de Romero and exhibiting his art. Well, Roy invited me to go because I've been his agent for about a decade. What Roy and I had worked on was he did a painting of Jacob de Cordova years ago, and we were doing an exhibit, and he asked me if I knew who he was, and I didn't. And when he told me that he was the founder of WACO, I couldn't believe it. I was like, well, how do I not know this? I've been in WACO since 1991. I've never heard of Jacob de Cordova, and one of my first jobs was working at the Chamber of Commerce. And I never heard of this. So I started asking other people in the room that were exhibiting their art from WACO if they had heard of it. Nobody had heard of him. So we just came up with an idea. Roy's pretty ingenious. He and his granddaughter put together a little coloring book, and it tells the story of the Jacob de Cordova. We were able to get it into WACO ISD, and every child in the district, including WACO ISD, La Vega, and McGregor, all received this little coloring book telling the story of Jacob and how WACO was founded. And in the very back of the book, there's even a little song called My Beautiful Daughter, because Jacob was quoted saying that he always felt that WACO was his beautiful daughter. Interestingly, he had 2 daughters. So I don't know what that was like for them, but this WACO was his beautiful daughter. Anyway, that's how we got involved, and I have always supported this idea of getting the community involved and learning who the founder of WACO was. And, he was a Spanish Jew from Jamaica, and he was raised in Britain because his mother was English. So he represents so many different cultures and aspects, and he was a world traveler, and he ended up doing one of the best maps. Sam Houston was quoted saying on the Capitol floor that the Jacob de Cordova map was the best map he had ever seen, and it's in the Congressional Library still to this day. And if anybody has a copy of it, please let me know, because it's very, very valuable.
All right, so let's go back into some of this history. So Jacob de Cordova, Spain, Jamaica, Britain, America, here in Texas.
Right.
What happened? How did he get here, and what happened?
When Jacob's family came to the States in the 30s or thereabouts, Jacob was a sick man.
And that would be the 1830s.
1830s.
Right, yeah.
So when they came here from Jamaica, he ended up going back. He had consumption, which is tuberculosis, his entire life. So this is a man who accomplished amazing things, but was always ill. So he went back to Jamaica, where he and his half-brother founded the first English paper in the Western Hemisphere, The Gleaner, which is still, I believe, in the family to this day. Then he came back, and with an initial entry point into Philadelphia, heard about what was going on as Texas was becoming a state. So there was going to be opportunity. And so the first aspect of his mind to bring himself to Texas was to be some kind of a merchant. That didn't work out in the trade field as much as he then said, well, maybe I should become a land merchant. Maybe he didn't call himself that, but that's what he was. He and his half-brother, over the course of this next decade, ended up addressing a lot of issues with regard to land titles at the time. In fact, we did a movie about this, and a good part of it is him fixing up land titles and negotiating with people, because you, at that juncture, had 6 different places where you could get a title from Mexico, from Spain, from the Republic of Texas before a certain date, the Republic of Texas after a certain date, and depending upon whether you were single or married, a different form of title. So, and that wasn't all. Then it became a state, so now the state had issues. Jacob was the one who figured that out in Waco. And he's the one who accumulated all the central land through partnerships with different people. So he was the man in charge, though he didn't own everything, but he always owned a piece of something that related to the entirety of Waco. And so he was asked to put together the tract. He reached out to a man named George Erath, who was well known in the area. He had surveyed the lands and knew the area as a surveyor from the late 1830s. And so the two of them together basically put together the initial tracts and then sales of property. They brought in Shapley Ross, was a man. This is what people remember Jacob for. You needed somebody who would be the stellar first person in the community to make the community have a chance. It's one thing to just build everything. It's another thing to have people live there and build something there. So Jacob is attributed with having reached out to Shapley Ross, who was an important person near the Austin area, convinced him to move his family here. And it's said in the materials we read that on March 1st, 1849, that's when that first sale took place. And Shapley was there. But most people here talk about something else about Jacob, about the gifts that he made of land for public purposes. And that's why people here really talk about him and remember him. His consumption caught up with him. He died in 1868. It took 17 years for them to settle the title to the land. People always ask why he had such a hard time financially. He was land rich, and he didn't, and the land was in the midst of Texas, in the midst of a civil war. So it was, you knew his character, because a lot of times when he couldn't pay money he owed for the land from the debts that he undertook to buy it, it was because he wasn't being paid from the people who he sold it to. And if those people were not in good shape, or he had made promises to get them certain things, he always let that money go. And so he was remembered for that as well. He did have lawsuits, he did have issues, but those were usually when people were duking it out with each other. So that's what we found out, and of course there's so much more to the story I can't even begin to say.
And remember, in regard to Waco, Jacob, when he settled here, he wanted this new town to have important things like places of worship. So anybody that wanted to open a church, whether it was Jewish or Christian, Muslim, Baptist, could do that. And at one time, Waco was known for a lot of synagogues that were here. Unfortunately, many of which have been burned down. But parks, schools, and even the city hall, he donated that. And then he sold land for homes and businesses at a cost of between anywhere starting at $2 up to $5 if you were a business. Imagine that. What we're working on, the Jacob de Cordova Society is now working on, is continuing that legacy, bringing it to light, getting the community involved. We want to work with kids. We want to work with really anybody who's interested in learning the history and seeing the vision that Jacob once saw. That's really our mission at the Jacob de Cordova Society. And we've recently, I think earlier this year or maybe the end of last year, we opened up another nonprofit called the Youth Innovation Studio, where it allows us to work with those children and kids that are in need of, one, that they're going to stay here in Waco and get educated and train them in other aspects other than a conventional college or university. And I'll let Jeff tell you a little bit more about the Youth Innovation Studio.
All the projects that I have been involved with over the years, though they stem from arts and culture, there's a reason for that, and that's usually because you have the chance in those environments to bring all ages together. It has to be for a reason. Sometimes it's we do a play, or sometimes it's we do a contest, play a game, and so forth. But in the arts and culture world, before I came to WACO, it was always music or some technology-driven area where people saw opportunities at the end of our engagements with them that they had not seen before. So when I took a look around WACO after I had learned about Jacob's history, it turned out that there was an opportunity to tell a story. I had just finished a project with a friend from Austin, Texas, who has been teaching in the film high school curriculum for 17 years. The people graduating from his program in Austin in the high school system there go on to get big jobs in the field. They're all well trained, and he had just retired. So I asked him whether he wanted to do a film on Jacob de Cordova, having no idea where that simple question would lead us to. But I knew that if he did it, that the underpinnings of it would have animation. And animation is where the kids can learn. And he's a high school teacher, which means he's been teaching kids already. So I'm sitting there with like, okay, let's see where we can go with this. And we had just done a project in Zambia together. And we, during COVID, it was going to be a trip. We were going to take people from his high school where he taught over to Lusaka, Zambia. We had planned it at the end of 2020, and we had planned it for 2020. COVID interfered, and so all of a sudden his high school film program was going to have to be taught online. He never would have agreed to this in any other circumstance, right? Making films is not something you can teach online. But here we are with COVID, so now our trip overseas to Lusaka, Zambia, that we had planned, and I had gone over there and met with people and had organized a program, was going to be canceled. No, what we did was we found the administrators. It was an odd time, so we were able to get 6 kids from 2 high schools in Zambia admitted for this program to become Austin students, high school students for 6 months, 8 months. And 2 of them are working in the industry since then. So there was so I reached out to him and said, could we do this again and maybe get some kids involved with the film, which of course is what we did. But now the next step led to the Youth Innovation Studio, because now that we had a proof of concept, we could see whether or not we could get kids from high school here in WACO. And it took a lot of effort over the course of many months. Monica knows many people. She's well connected in the WACO school environment, and we talked to a lot of people, but it's not so easy to get teachers and family and parents to say, oh, okay, I'm going to sign up for a new program. What's this all about? We had the curriculum because Ken Rogers had taught it for 17 years, and we had a film that we were doing, so we had proof of concept. It turns out that the film was being launched, would be being done during WACO's 175th year, because I was just doing the math, and I figured, well, let's make it part of the 175th celebration, which is what we did. The community wasn't totally ready to celebrate WACO 175, so we were really central to a lot of the activity, running art exhibits and running programs and expert programs all around the founding of WACO, and featuring the history of Jacob de Cordova. And so we began to get young people involved, and in the process we met with a man who has a program with high schools, Corey Dickman, who runs a program called Triple Win. And that Triple Win program, it's a win for the school, it's a win for the kid, and it's a win for the business. So there's your 3 wins. It was set up so that kids could have an opportunity to help a business, and he'd provide the training, typically in the trade areas. So they did a lot of work in the trade, and so we just said, well, isn't what we're doing with digital storytelling a trade? And we can work with kids. And so he said, well, I can get some kids in a program for you, and you can showcase it to others. And then maybe, because I'm connected to the schools, more people will be interested. So that's where we are at the start.
I think this is so important. Not only are we looking back at the celebration in the history, 175 years, but by working with the students, we're also planning for the future. You're doing a lot of preparation to lay the groundwork. And as we start to come to the end of our time together, and man, I just thank you so much for the work that you have put in to uncover this history and now to bring it to light. Thank you for that. Thank you. As a new member of WACO, I'm learning so much from you. Also looking out of the future, and I think it's 25 years in the future.
That's right.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, at the
Monica.
200th anniversary. So at the 200th anniversary, we have come up with an idea of doing a time capsule. And we're organizing that now and looking for volunteers and people with ideas of what kinds of things would go in the time capsule. And that will be in the cornerstone of, am I able to say? Okay, so it's the Taylor Museum, which is the history of McLennan County and Waco Museum. They're under renovation right now, and they're hoping to open again in 2026/27, sometime in there. And when they do that, that's where we're going to place the time capsule in a cornerstone on their property. And then in 25 years, in the year 2049, is when that time capsule will be opened. And what's interesting about these kids, because we met with them yesterday, there's 10 kids we're working with from local high schools, including Rappaport Academy and Waco High and some others. Those kids will be in their 40s. So whatever they design now will actually be in the time capsule as well as other things. So we're looking for interesting people who know stories or maybe would be interested in even some ideas of what we could put in the time capsule.
So what kind of things have you been thinking about so far? What has come up as far as the time capsule?
One of the members of our original steering committee for Jacob D. Cordova Society is Bobby Horner. And Bobby is well connected in the history of this area and in the various groups and so forth. So he's chairing the time capsule committee, and people respond to him. He's just such a great and hard worker. And he has begun to take a look at some of the high points in the history. Right now, Waco goes by the name A City to Believe In. It was once the 6-Shooter Junction. There are a whole bunch of names like that. So what we're thinking of from the time capsule is to divide it, because this is really the time capsule of Waco from this, when it became a city in the state of Texas, or it was a village in the beginning, and we haven't mentioned that, but the Waco is the name of the Native American tribe, WACO. That was part of the discussion that Jacob and George Erath and Jacob's wife Rebecca all had when they were making the decision in 1849 what to call the city. So it became, it became the city of, it became the village of Waco and the Native American tribes here. Bobby is leading that effort, in terms of the types of things that can go into the time capsule underneath a particular era. There could be high points, but we want to, because it's virtual as well, we have the opportunity to gather all kinds of stories. And because we're connected to the Taylor Museum, some of these pieces are going to end up in the museum. So one of the goals of the Jacob D. Cordova Society, which was given to us by Professor Stephen Sloan and by Eric Swanson from Historic Waco, was that they really wanted to see a Waco History Day. So the time capsule became a vehicle to do this, because we know if we open the door, we're going to get story after story after story, and there's not going to be room in a time capsule to put everything in it. But if every year on March 1st, in commemoration of the founding of Waco, we tell another story, we'll be able to get all the stories out in one manner or another. So, but what we're looking for is for the community. From my point of view, I'm from another part of the country, so all I'm doing is stirring the pot. and saying to everybody, come on, tell your stories and get the stuff in. And then from everything that comes in, there'll be some pieces. I can tell you one that I'm going to recommend that goes in there, and that is The Women of Waco is a great story for us to tell. This it came out from one of the founding families of the Village Square, the Sanger family. Joan Sanger, a descendant, said to me, you really should look at the history of the women of Waco. And sure enough, these are the quiet ones who this community doesn't exist without. And there's a picture of the organization of I don't think it was called the Waco Civic Theater, but it was the original hall, 3,000 people, where they would hold concerts. And a woman named Gussie Oscar was the lady who made it happen. If it wasn't for Gussie, you wouldn't have had the shows. She went to New York. She went to everywhere. She got thrown in jail because she ran shows on Sunday. And, she was a Jewish woman and so on and so forth. She's buried here in Waco. And the current lead of Creative Waco, Fiona Bond, really just points in a direction. She actually did a podcast on Gussie for us. So there's, we're going to find those stories and figure out how they can fit into a 25-year span. But most importantly, the kids who are going to be working with us, we're going to ask them, after they've done some storytelling and watched others, we're then going to ask them to tell their story at the very end. That's the piece that is going to be for sure not shown for 25 years. We're going to ask them, what do they think Waco's going to look like in 25 years? Their contributions. And that piece nobody will see. It'll be quiet. For sure, that's the one piece that we've finally come up with something that we know is going to go in there that nobody's going to see until 2049. So that's pretty much what we've come up with so far.
Oh, I love that, Jeff. That's just so much fun. Monica, we're all about the positive here on the Waco Experience, an American Story. Close us out with some inspiration about what you've learned and where we're going.
Well, what I've learned is in these times, there's so much politics and polarization. And what Jacob always felt and believed in, and how he started this community, was bringing the community together and maintaining that, and everyone living a happy life. And that's really where I feel comfort. It gives me comfort in this polarization. And I feel like it's a great opportunity for other Wacoans to come together for the service of others, and just learning the history. And, history is what teaches us how to be better moving forward, learning from other mistakes. I have a child that, still calls me and asks me for advice because she doesn't want to do the same, bumping her knees and elbows. And that's what we're doing. We're working with the community and with the youth, and it gives me a lot of inspiration and something to be proud of.
The Waco Experience, an American Story, is a production of D. Scott Smith Company, all rights reserved. Thank you for listening.